In the blistering heat of August 2015, a small town in rural Montana was consumed by a single, terrifying mystery. 9-year-old Lily Peterson, a bright-eyed girl with an infectious laugh, had vanished without a trace from a church picnic. The woods behind the community hall, a place she knew intimately, had swallowed her whole. Search parties scoured every inch of the rugged landscape for weeks, but the only thing they found was a single red hair ribbon, tied to the branch of a gnarled oak tree. The lead detective on the case, a seasoned investigator named Elias Vance, worked himself to the bone, chasing every whisper and every dead end, until the trail went impossibly cold. The town of Harmony Falls, once a quiet and idyllic place, was now defined by a decade of grief and unanswered questions. The case became a ghost story, a cautionary tale whispered to children, a haunting reminder of a lost innocent. But 10 years later, a discovery so shocking, so utterly out of place, would tear open the old wounds and resurrect the nightmare. 100 miles away, in a desolate stretch of the Bitterroot National Forest, a young college student named Clara Jennings was on a solo hiking trip, a test of her endurance and her will. She had been off the marked trails for 2 days, navigating by a well-worn compass and the sun. It was late afternoon when she stumbled upon it, a small, hidden cave, its entrance obscured by a tangle of overgrown vines. Curiosity, a dangerous and potent force, drew her in. Inside, in the cool, damp air, she found the expected things, a nest of bats, scattered rocks, and a thin layer of dust. But then she saw it, glinting in the faint light that filtered through a crack in the rock. It was a tarnished metal object, half buried in the soil. She knelt, her heart pounding a strange rhythm against her ribs, and scraped away the dirt. It was a child's police badge, a toy, but it felt strangely heavy in her hand. Engraved on the back were the words, Deputy Leo. She knew instantly that this was no ordinary trinket. It was a key to a decade-old lock, a misplaced puzzle piece from a story she had only ever heard as a chilling local legend. She felt a cold dread seep into her bones, the kind that comes from touching something that should have remained buried. The call came to Elias Vance's small, cluttered office in Harmony Falls. He was now a grizzled, weary-looking man, the decade of unanswered questions etched into the lines around his eyes. He answered the phone with a practiced sigh, expecting another mundane complaint about a noisy neighbor. The voice on the other end was a young, breathless ranger, relaying the details of the discovery in a frantic torrent. A badge, a toy police badge, found in a cave 100 miles north. The name, Deputy Leo. It sounds like it could be from that cold case, the Peterson girl. They said she was obsessed with that character. Elias's hand, holding the receiver, tightened into a white-knuckled grip. The name, Deputy Leo, hit him like a physical blow. It was the name of a character from a children's television show Lily Peterson had adored. The show's merchandise had been ubiquitous that summer. But why would a toy badge be found in a remote cave so far from Harmony Falls? The misleading narrative of a simple runaway or a random abduction, the one the town had clung to for so long, began to unravel in his mind. This was a deliberate act. The badge was an anomaly, a clue left behind for a reason. He stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the worn floorboards. 10 years of dust, of paper-thin leads, of haunting silence, was about to be swept away. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a call to action. The site, a rugged, isolated patch of forest, was a stark contrast to the small-town suburban setting of the initial disappearance. Elias, accompanied by a young, eager detective named Maya Santos, spent days methodically searching the area around the cave. He was a man possessed, his intuition guiding him with a certainty he hadn't felt in years. The official theory, that the badge was simply a random discard, was dismissed by him instantly. He saw the placement as a message. They found nothing else of substance near the cave, no signs of a struggle, no remains. But on the 4th day, Maya, her gaze fixed on the ground, spotted something small and metallic wedged in the base of a hollowed-out log, a few hundred feet from the cave's entrance. It was a tarnished silver lighter, its surface scratched and worn. She picked it up, her gloved fingers turning it over. Engraved on the side was a single cryptic symbol, a small, stylized bird, its wings spread wide. Elias's face tightened. He recognized the symbol. It was the logo of the Harmony Angels, a local charity for children with terminal illnesses. The founder and most prominent member of the charity was a respected philanthropist and former high school football coach, a man named Marcus Thorne. Marcus Thorne was a pillar of the community, a man who had built a small fortune from a successful construction business, and then devoted his life to charity. He was the kind of person who gave commencement speeches and shook hands with senators. He had even been one of the first to volunteer for the search parties for Lily Peterson, his face a mask of concern and grief on the local news. Elias remembered him well, a man who seemed to have a tireless supply of compassion. The new lead, however, led him to Thorne's lavish estate on the outskirts of Harmony Falls. They conducted a preliminary interview, a standard procedure, but Elias's eyes, narrowed and focused, missed nothing. Thorne was charming, calm, and cooperative, offering them coffee and a sad smile. He explained that the lighter was likely a souvenir, a common trinket given to donors. The bird logo was a symbol of hope. "We wanted to make a difference," Thorne said, his voice a smooth, practiced baritone. "We wanted to be angels for these kids." But as he spoke, Elias noticed something in his gaze, a fleeting moment of cold calculation that flickered behind the mask of sorrow. It was a micro-expression, gone in an instant, but it was enough to cement Elias's suspicion. This man, the hidden-in-plain-sight villain, was their anomaly. The polite, sympathetic conversation was a facade. He knew, with an unshakable certainty, that Marcus Thorne was connected to the case. The investigation shifted, methodically peeling back the layers of Thorne's public persona. They began with his finances, a slow and painstaking process that yielded nothing suspicious. They interviewed old friends and colleagues, who all spoke of a man of impeccable character. Elias hit a wall of respectability, a fortress of public admiration that seemed impenetrable. But his gut feeling, his intuition over logic, told him to dig deeper. He started with the small things, the insignificant details that no one else would have noticed. He revisited the old case files, the hundreds of hours of interviews, the countless witness statements. He found a single, forgotten interview with a disgruntled former employee of Thorne's, a man who had been fired for insubordination. The man had claimed, in a moment of drunken rage, that Thorne had a secret place, a private retreat where he went to be alone. The former employee had been dismissed as a crackpot, his statement relegated to the back of the case file. The description of the location was vague, a remote, undeveloped piece of land Thorne had purchased years ago, a place he never discussed. It was a shot in the dark, a whisper from the past, but Elias felt a jolt of recognition. The man had described the property's location near a series of old, disused hunting trails, trails that snaked into the same part of the national forest where the badge was found. The narrative was becoming clearer, more horrifying. The misleading narrative of a random disappearance was a fabrication. This was a planned, deliberate abduction, and the man who was supposed to be a hero was the architect of the crime. The team, now operating on Elias's unshakable conviction, descended on the property. It was a vast, wooded expanse with a small, unassuming cabin in the center. The cabin was spotless, a minimalist space of sterile cleanliness, but the real discovery was found in the barn behind it. It was a makeshift art studio, filled with canvases of vibrant, abstract paintings. But it was not the art that caught their attention. It was a series of journals stacked on a workbench, their covers worn and stained. Elias opened the first one, his hands trembling. The pages were filled with obsessive, meticulous notes, not on art, but on the habits and routines of local children. There were detailed observations of bus stops, playground schedules, and the times families went to church. He found a specific entry, dated the day before Lily Peterson disappeared, a chillingly clinical notation. Subject: Lily P. Target acquired. Observation successful. Proceeding. The unveiling of Thorne's true nature was no longer a theory. It was a devastating reality laid bare on the pages of a macabre diary. The charity, the community involvement, the endless philanthropy, it was all a cover, a way to get closer to his victims, to hide his monstrous desires in plain sight. The confrontation with Marcus Thorne was swift and brutal. They found him at the Harmony Angels annual fundraising gala, a scene of opulent glamour and shallow smiles. Elias and Maya approached him as he held a glass of champagne, his face radiating an aura of false sincerity. He saw them coming, a flicker of something dark and ancient in his eyes, but he held his composure, offering them a practiced, charming smile. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice as smooth as silk, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" Elias didn't bother with pleasantries. "We found your cabin, Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice low and guttural. "We found the journals." Thorne's face went from a pleasant mask to a frozen portrait of contempt. His jaw tightened, the facade finally cracking. He didn't deny it, didn't attempt to feign ignorance. He simply looked at them, a sneer twisting his lips. "She was just a child," Elias said, his voice thick with a decade of frustration and sorrow. She adored you. What did she ever do to you? The question was a plea, a demand for a shred of humanity, but Thorne offered none. He just stared at Elias, his eyes cold and empty. The confession came not in the sterile environment of an interrogation room, but in the chaos of a packed ballroom. Thorne, cornered, his empire of lies crumbling around him, simply began to talk, his voice a chilling monotone. The badge was for her, he said, his words a clinical recitation of a depraved fantasy. She wanted to be a deputy, like on the show. I told her I would take her to a special place, a training camp, a place only for future heroes. She was so excited. He recounted the horrific details without remorse, his words like sharp shards of glass. He described how he had planned the abduction meticulously, how he had taken Lily to the remote cabin, and how he had left the badge as a final, cruel memento of her trust. It was a game, you see, he continued, a thin, humorless smile on his lips. I wanted to see if anyone was clever enough to find the clue, to follow the breadcrumbs. It's so much more fun when there's a challenge, isn't it? Elias could only stare, his stomach churning with revulsion. The man before him wasn't a monster. He was a void, a hollow shell of a human being driven by a remorseless desire to inflict pain. His confession wasn't a sign of regret, but a final, triumphant act of cruelty. The resolution was bittersweet, a mix of relief and profound sorrow. Lily Peterson's remains were found in a shallow grave on Thorne's property, a decade of mystery finally given a somber, devastating conclusion. The small, unassuming stone in the cemetery, for so long a symbol of an unanswered question, was now a place of somber pilgrimage, a place where a town could finally begin to mourn. Thorne, his reputation in tatters, was a broken man, but his public downfall was a small victory against the enormity of his crimes. The unveiling had not only solved a cold case, but had revealed the horrifying underbelly of a seemingly perfect community. Elias Vance, the determined investigator, watched as the town of Harmony Falls began to heal. He knew the scar would always remain, a reminder of the darkness that could lurk beneath the surface of respectability. He had trusted his instincts, followed a gut feeling when everyone else had given up, and in doing so, he had brought a lost child home. He wasn't a hero, he knew that. He was just a man who had refused to let a ghost story remain untold. The case of Lily Peterson was closed, but the memory of her innocent face, and the chilling words of the man who stole her life, would forever haunt the quiet corners of Harmony Falls.